We're so pleased to be partnering with the East Central Regional Library and to have all of you joining us. I'm also muting my computer behind me because there's probably a weird echo. Sorry. This Moving Words event features the talents of Michael Hall, Laura Purdie Salas, and Joyce Sidman. And I'm Wendy Worden, Programs and Services Assistant at the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library, which is the Minnesota of Congress designated Minnesota Center for the Book. As we get started today, we would like to acknowledge the Dakota people, indigenous keepers of the land from which I broadcast. This land was reserved by the Dakota in the Treaty of Traverse de Sioux, signed with the United States in 1851, and it remains sacred to them today. I also want to acknowledge the Ojibwe people, fellow indigenous inhabitants of this land. Dakota and Ojibwe people are the original stewards of stories in this place now called Minnesota, and we at the Friends honor that tradition and the knowledge and values embedded in it as we work to lift up storytellers in our state today. The Friends has coordinated the year-long Minnesota Book Awards program for 14 years, and as Minnesota's Center for the Book, we produce programming that benefits all ages and reaches all corners of the state. This programming is supported by funding for the Center for the Book included in Minnesota's K-12 education bill. We are grateful to all the state representatives and senators who advocated for that funding. On to our main event. The series is made possible in part by the state of Minnesota through a grant to the Minnesota Department of Education, and additional support is provided by the Harlan Boss Foundation for the Arts and Education Minnesota. We will have a reading and conversation followed by a Q&A with you, the audience. Hello, audience. Biographies of each panelist will be posted in the chat, and we'll be following up this program with a brief survey to get your feedback. Please visit your favorite local bookseller to purchase titles from our featured writers, though Next Chapter in St. Paul has partnered with us on these Moving Words events, and they have books available for sale, of course. We'll put links in the chat throughout the program, but please feel free also to pop your questions in as you have them, and I will relay them to our featured authors in the second half of the program. Thank you to my chat friend Amelia, who will be monitoring the chat for your questions. And to start things off, we'll have a brief reading and presentation from each author. So first, I'd like to welcome Michael Hall. His newest book is Swing. It is about the letters L, O, V, and E, and a swing set. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Am I there?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad to be with Joyce and Laura, both of whom I admire so much, and I'm glad to be a part of this program. I'm gonna turn on my screen sharing. Let's see if that works. Did that work? Does anyone?
Yes, yep. Go ahead.
I thought, you know, I happen to be, my wife and I are on a working getaway up on Lake Michigan. And I thought, you know how you have these backgrounds you can do in Zoom. And I thought, well, I've got the perfect background right here, but I can't really turn and use it as a background because I just turn into this black silhouette. So anyway, so I thought I'd take a picture just to give you a context of where I am in this beautiful spot. So I'm going to talk about Swing, which is a book about 4 letters, L, O, V, and E, and how they have their various prejudices make it difficult for them to share a schoolyard swing set. But I want to start by talking a little bit about where the story came from. And I think authors are often asked where they get their ideas. And I always have a hard time with that question. But I do know that I steal things a lot. And I mostly steal from myself. And the book Swing is largely stolen from a book that I did about 5 years ago called Little I. And little I is about a lowercase I whose dot falls off, rolls over a cliff, splashes into the ocean, and is pulled away at sea. And little I goes on this weeks-long adventure to try to find her dot. And when she finds it, she discovers that she actually no longer wants her dot. So she goes back home after her adventure to discover that she has become a very meaningful one-letter word. And this book is very similar in that the, I was going to show little pictures, but that's sort of some pictures from that. She finds her dot, it's not working, so she goes home, finds out that she's a word, I. And this story is sort of similar in that it's about these four letters who eventually are going to form a word, and you can sort of tell what the word is right off the bat. But when I was thinking about little I, it was important to me that the letters knew about making words, and they were pretty good spellers. And I thought it would be more fun to do a story where the letters don't know that they have this job to do of making words. And they certainly don't know how to spell. And yet some of them sort of think that they devise these rules for how they should play with each other. And some letters shouldn't play with other letters. So that there's, for example, the vowels, the small group of vowels, and then there's this group of consonants. And so the consonants have all these ideas about how, well, you shouldn't play with vowels because they're different. And so as I was working, and I thought that we sort of know that you need both consonants and vowels to make words, but they don't know that. And so we're sort of at a higher level looking down at them. So eventually I found three different ways of talking about differences with letters. And then when I discovered that using the word love, I could sort of have the letters sort of taking turns being the outsider of the group. And so that's where that sort of the basis of the story. So I'm going to start with the first part of the story, and I think I might just read it, and then I'll talk a little more. The first letter was alone when a second letter arrived. "Can I play with you?" the second letter asked. The second letter was different. Unlike the first letter, who lived in the middle of the alphabet, the second letter lived at the far end. "I'm sorry," said the first letter. "These swings are saved for letters from my neighborhood." Then a third letter came by. "Can I play with you?" the third letter asked. The third letter was different. Unlike the first two letters, the third letter was a member of a small group called vowels. "I'm sorry," said the second letter. "Vowels are not allowed on these swings." Then a fourth letter appeared. "Can I play with you?" the fourth letter asked. The fourth letter was different. Unlike the first three letters, who were made up of straight lines, the fourth letter was round. "I'm sorry," said the third letter. "These swings are saved for..." "Ouch, you bumped me." "Did not," said the second letter. "Did too," said the third letter. "Did too," said the first letter. While the first three letters tussled, the fourth letter climbed onto a swing. "Hey," said the second letter. The first three letters scrambled for the open swings. "I wanted that swing," said the second letter. "Too bad," said the third letter. "I have an idea," said the fourth letter. "Let's just swing." And they did. And then when we go into the second half, which is the swinging part, where they learn the joys of being inclusive rather than exclusive, is the second half. And we start this off by going to a different perspective, and we're looking at it from the side. And I put this school in there both to show that we've changed our point of view, but also I wanted to make sure that this was a school playground and that this was sort of a safe place where these letters actually know each other because they go to school with each other. And then I thought I wanted it to be more clear that it was a school, so I did for the title page an image from the inside of the school, looking out then from the other side of the sunset. And I kept thinking as I was making this that I was really thinking about this as if I was making a movie, like where does the camera go and what's in front of what and what's the angle for this and that shot. And then I put the title on this page and I put it in sort of like a movie being projected on a screen. And part of the reason I did that was because later on I want to show some posters and I wanted those to be covered up because I don't want you to see them. So now I just want to talk about the beginning a little bit. As I was doing this, I realized at one point that I had 5 double-page spreads alternating that were not quite in a row, but with one spread in between each. And I just thought they were going to all look like this, and it was going to be so tedious. And I thought, well, maybe I can put some, and I felt like I needed the trees in order to sort of show the perspective that we had. And I thought maybe I could put some squirrels or some birds in the trees, and maybe they can do a parallel story. And I thought, well, I don't like to add things. I prefer to subtract things. So I thought, how can these trees add meaning to this book? And I remembered this thing, since I was thinking so much about movies. There's this movie technique called a dolly zoom. And it's a technique where you have your movie camera and you have like a zoom lens, and you can twist it so that it makes the image appear it's going away, and then you could twist it the other way and it's coming back. With a dolly zoom, you could twist it, for example, so the image is going away, but then at the same time you're doing that, you move the camera closer. So both of those things are happening, and the effects in this case would be that the characters in the foreground stay where they are, and the background can either go forward or backward from them. I just want to show you the most classic one is from the movie Vertigo. And so here you see Cary Grant's hands in the bottom of this, and as he's looking down the stairwell, the floor seems to get farther and farther and farther away, and that shows how he's feeling dizzy and disoriented. I got another quick one. This is this character, Liz Lemon, who's seen something scary, and as she sort of stays where she is, but you can see the background is getting bigger and bigger and sort of going away from her. So I thought I would like to have a dolly zoom in this picture book. And I wanted to have the feeling, it's not something I would really want you to notice. I don't know if anyone did notice it, but it's more of a feeling that I wanted to create, a feeling, maybe sort of a feeling of menace and a feeling of confinement, and the feeling that as they reject each other, their world is getting smaller and smaller. So I'm just going to show you that all together. So you've already seen all these spreads, but here it is, I think, the number of trees, and now they're getting closer, 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 and now they're really, really close. So that's how that worked. I'll get back to the story. Now that we're swinging up and down, back and forth, higher, and now we're looking again through the school window, and we see these posters that talk about which neighborhood you live in and how vowels rock, and letters are either straight lines, round, or a combination. So I think at school they're learning about all of this stuff, and they're sort of trying to practice it or learn how to execute it in the playground. So higher and higher and higher, and now they're doing that classic dream of a swinger that you go all the way around in a circle, and then they go even higher. They actually become unattached from the swing set until their tummies were laughing and their hearts were cheering. When they landed, they were different. The first letter was on the first swing, the second letter was on the third swing, the third letter was on the fourth swing, and the fourth letter was on the second swing. And the first letter said, "Let's do it again." And that is the end of Swing. I want to say, let's see, I wanted to say one more thing. Yes, and in the shameless self-promotion category, I have a book that's coming out next spring called House Mouse, about a mouse who finds a flame in just beyond a wild asparagus patch. And so she builds a stove around the flame so she can always find the warm spot. And eventually she builds a whole house around this place that already has the attributes of a home. So that's coming out, and I'm very excited about that. So I think that's it. I think I came in pretty well, under 45 minutes. So what do I do?
Stop your screen share, my friend.
Oh,
I will pop in.
Boom. There we go.
Fantastic. There's so much to think about there, and I think I love the way you captured in words the exact feeling of swinging. That's that your tummy laughing and your heart is soaring, and I miss that, because now occasionally I get a little bit motion sick on swings. Something happened when I got old. So thank you so much, Michael. I would love to bring our next featured writer up, Lori Purdie Salas, whose website tagline I love very much, small reads for brighter days, which I really need right now. So I'm very pleased to welcome Laura to us this morning.
Hi, thank you. I am so happy to be here and be part of this awesome group of book lovers, and to talk with book lovers who are watching this at home. I loved hearing the backstory to Michael's newest book, and you know, I'm always so jealous of author illustrators, but also your forthcoming book. Have you read the poem, I think it's called The Country by Billy Collins, involving a mouse who finds a matchstick? And so I'm just thinking, might be a connection there. Okay, on to my stuff. I'm going to share about my book called Clover Kitty Goes to Kitty Garden, which I wrote and Hiroe Nakata did the beautiful illustrations for. So before I chat about it, I'm just going to share a couple of pages from it. Let's see. Clover Kitty liked calm things, knitting mittens, nibbling kibble, catnapping on a warm floor. Sometimes she wished she had a friend to knit or nibble or nap with. But mostly, life was perfect until one Monday morning, Mama Kitty announced, "Do you remember what today is? The first day of Kitty Garden. Are you ready for friends and games and songs?" Pictures of high fives and curly slides, dusty chalk and gluey paws filled Clover's head. She was not ready. Okay, so I wanted to share a couple of things about Clover Kitty. First of all, I'm going to share a little bit about the idea and how the story evolved. And then I want to show you a bit about the writing technique and what I borrowed from someone else. Sorry, my camera is a little close. So the idea for Clover Kitty came about 3 years ago. I was listening to a podcast, and the author Anna Kang and her illustrator husband Christopher Wyant were talking about their book, I Am Not Scared. And so they were talking about all these fears. And the first thing that popped into my head is, being kind of contrary myself, the first thing that popped into my head was, what is nobody afraid of? And could I make a story out of that? And so the thing that popped into my head was a pile of puppies. Nobody in the world could be afraid of a pile of puppies. So I wrote that down in my idea file, and I thought, I'm going to see if I can somehow build a book in which a pile of puppies is scary. So I tried to do that, and I failed. It was not working. And so then I thought, well, maybe a different animal. I tried a bear cub, Monica the bear, and that did not work either. And eventually I came to kittens and to Clover Kitty, and it started to feel like a character that I could care about. But I still wasn't sure why Clover Kitty was afraid. What was scaring her? So I thought, what scares me? What do I not like? And for me, the answer is big crowds of people. If I go to the state fair or to a theme park or something, I'm the one who likes to get there, you know, as the sun is rising and nobody else is there yet, and there are no crowds. And, you know, by lunchtime when it's getting crowded, I head home. So big crowds of people, not for me. So I thought, well, maybe Clover Kitty could be a little bit like me. Maybe she is not comfortable with crowds. And then I thought, because as writers, we always like to make it as hard as possible for our characters, I thought maybe she also doesn't like bright lights and loud noises and icky textures and stuff. So I gave her those problems as well. And I gave her all these problems to solve. And, you know, she has a mama kitty and she has a teacher, Miss Snappytail. And some of the, some readers have commented, well, why isn't mama helping her? And Miss Snappytail, her teacher, should take care of these problems and make Clover more comfortable. And of course, a teacher and a parent, you know, they try to make things better for their kids. But the truth is that kids face a lot of problems every day, and a lot of them have to solve these problems on their own. And so I wanted to make Clover the hero of her own story. So Clover does a couple of things. First of all, she, with great difficulty, makes a friend, Oliver, who is wonderful and helps make Kitty Garten more fun for her. But Clover also finds some coping tools. So let me show you just a second. Okay, sorry, I have my screen sharing wrong. So let me stop that. Too many props. Okay, so the first thing is when Clover hears the very loud and annoying gong for story time, which is terrible, she decides to wear earmuffs. And the next thing that Clover Kitty does to cope, she's solving all her own problems, is because the cafeteria lights are just horribly glaring and hurt her eyes, she decides she will wear sunglasses to Kitty Garten. And finally, because the story time circle rug and the nap time mats are very crowded and scratchy, she decides to bring her own soft, silky rug from home. So basically, Clover Kitty creates her own survival kit for school, which I love. I think that's what a lot of kids are having to do. And frankly, in today's world, we're all having to create our own survival kits because things look so different right now. So I love that Clover is her own hero, and I'm happy that she's a little bit like me with things she's uncomfortable with. but still finds a way to deal with them. And maybe she's a little bit like you too. And so that's about kind of how the story evolved. Then I wanted to share a little bit about the writing process. Michael Hall talked a bit about stealing things, and he steals mostly from himself, which is probably more honorable because I like to steal from other writers. And one thing I love to do is when I'm reading other books and I really enjoy a book, I'll ask, gosh, what did I love so much about that? What made that book totally work for me? And then I'll see if it's a writing technique that maybe I can borrow and apply to my own totally different book. And that's what I did in Clover Kitty too. So I will show you. There's a picture book writer who I really love her work. Her name is Tammy Sauer, and she has a book called Mr. Duck Means Business. And this picture book, it doesn't rhyme, and it's just a regular story. So part of it goes, then one especially hot summer day, Mr. Duck had just begun his morning gliding when he saw Pig. Look out below, oink, oink, splash. Okay, so this doesn't rhyme, but then when Mr. Duck is highly upset, it turns to rhyme. Mr. Duck sputtered, he muttered, he tail a-fluttered, but Pig did not get the message. And I loved that. I loved how it was written in regular sentences, but then when things got emotional, it became more intense with rhyme. And so I decided to try that in Clover Kitty Goes to Kittygarten. So most of the book does not rhyme. Here they are at recess. At recess, Oliver came over and asked softly, "Do you want to seesaw with me?" Before she could answer, a squealing tornado of fangs and fur circled Clover. See, kitties can be scary. And then I decided that when things go wrong, we're going to fall into rhyme. So in Clover Kitty, here she is. They're doing a little dress up parade through the hall. And I'll warn you that Clover does not probably make the best choices here. She doesn't handle this in the best way possible. After nap time, Miss Snappytail marched the kitties through school like prisoners. A tail touched Clover's face. In her personal space, that was it. Clover spit. She bit. She threw a fur-flying hissy fit. I quit. Clover fled. See you tomorrow, Clover? Asked Oliver. And then it goes back to, the regular non-rhyming way that the story is mostly written in. So I learned to write each book as I write it, but also from looking at the books of the many, many other writers whose work I love and seeing what I can borrow from them to put into my own books. All right, that is what I wanted to share with you about Clover Kitty. Thanks.
Super, super fun thinking about the way you use sounds in much the way that I think we I don't know, we're used to poets thinking about the way they use sounds, and since kids' books often take that form, why not? I really enjoyed Clover Kitty, perhaps because she is a little like me. Our third speaker this morning is Joyce Sidman, who will have a new book for us in February, which she hopes will foster curiosity and wonder about the Earth, called Hello Earth, Poems to Our Planet. Welcome, Joyce. You're still on mute.
Hi, I'm here. Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I am thrilled to be here with all of you. I really enjoyed Michael's presentation and Laura's, and you're a tough act to follow. But I would really love to talk about a book of mine that's coming up in winter called Hello Earth, Poems to Our Planet. And I'm excited about that book. I think all of us writers and illustrators get excited about our next book. When we write a book, it kind of goes into the past, and we're looking toward the future. We're looking at what we're working on right now. So this book is called Hello Earth, Poems to Our Planet, and it is about Earth on a big scale. So about Earth as a planet, and all the layers inside of it, and the continents and the oceans and the jungles. And but that's not the reason I want to talk about it. The reason I want to talk about it is that it was created in a different way than most picture books. It was created backwards. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now and show you the cover. So here's the cover of Hello Earth, Poems to Our Planet. And most picture books, as you heard from Laura and Michael, are done first with an idea in your head. And as you heard from them, they get ideas from all kinds of places. They get them from their past, or they get them from other books, or they get them from things that they see or their experiences. And so these books start in an author's head, and they develop that idea, and they take things from other places, or they revise, and they try to discover, as Laura did, what their story is really about. This book began in a very different way. There are publishers that go to something called the Bologna International Book Fair, and they look for picture books from other countries, and they are trying to find a book that is something a little bit different from what they offer in their country, and bring it back to their country and publish it there. So there are all these people from all different countries looking at all of this art and text and really absorbing it and thinking, which one of these do I want to bring home? The publisher for Hello Earth, you can see it's Erdman's Book for Young Readers, and particularly the editor, Kathleen Mers, saw the Spanish version of Hello Earth and the Spanish version of this book, and she fell in love with the illustrations. And so she brought it back to this country, and I got this email. And she said to me, Joyce, I have these wonderful illustrations from this book, and I want to buy the illustration rights for this book to publish in the US. And I want you to write the poems for it. Okay? New poems, completely new poems. And she showed me the illustrations, and I'm going to show some to you. So here are some continents on Earth, and you can see all the little figures in here, which I really loved, the children from each continent and the animals and the geographical effects. Here we have Earth history, and we have the dinosaurs, and And here's a volcano exploding. So lots of drama, and yet these tiny figures that that are just doing all sorts of brave and interesting things. So I loved them. I thought, wow, I love these illustrations. Here are some whimsical ones. Here's an island that looks different from any island on Earth because it's not actually a mountain from the ocean's floor. It's somehow this floating island. And this is one of my favorite illustrations of a child touching the sky and trying to touch the moon. And this was something that I really loved and related to because I've always wanted to touch the moon, like many of the rest of you. So I'm going to turn back to just my face. There we go. So I saw these wonderful illustrations, and I got very excited about them. And so I answered her and I said, sure, I love these. I'll do this. It's completely different than the way I usually write a book. But yeah, I mean, it's what could go wrong? Well, it turned out that a lot could go wrong, that I had these beautiful illustrations, but I had to somehow draw them all together. I had to start in one place and move to another place and end up at the ending. I couldn't just write a poem about a volcano and then switch to the jungle and then switch to the moon. That's not how I write books. I had to have a flow. I had to have an arc, which all books have. And it took me a long time to try to figure that out. And there was another thing that that was in the way, which I figured out how to get around, but I wasn't so sure. And that was that, let's see, here we go. There were some strange illustrations in this book and ones that I didn't quite get. So like this one here, you won't see this in the final book. In the Spanish text, this had something to do with building a new earth, but I didn't really get the vase with the houseplant in it thing, and I just so I said to Kathleen, "Are there pictures that I can leave out? Are there illustrations that I can leave out?" And she said, "Sure." And I said, "Can I rearrange them?" So, in other words, build my arc by moving the illustrations around. And she said, "Sure." So then I had no excuse not to do this. If I could move them around in any way I could, then that meant that I needed to press forward, and I needed to figure out exactly how I was going to do this. Now, I was working concurrently on a book that will be out in April called Dear Tree Frog. And this is a book, I'm obsessed by tree frogs. And this is a book about a little girl who moves to a new place and she finds a tree frog. And the book is poems addressed to this tree frog, which becomes her friend. So they're letter poems. So I had that in the back of my mind. And I also began to look at very closely back at the illustrations that I had fallen in love with and at the children in those illustrations and what they were doing, because that's really what made me fall in love with this book, these children being brave and doing all these wonderful things. going out into the wilderness and camping and meeting the outdoors with joy and with curiosity and with wonder. See here, the boys and girls are meeting the world with joy and curiosity and wonder. So I thought, okay, this book has to be from these children to the earth. It will be, their voice will be the voice of the poem. They will be going out into the world and exploring it. And the book will be about that joy and wonder and curiosity and appreciation, because that is how I feel about the earth. And I love a quote that says, and I don't have it in front of me, I just thought of including it, but it's basically about, you can love the earth, but unless you feel the love back from the earth, your bond won't be as strong. So I felt like I had to create this book so that children would feel that love from the earth, would understand that the earth was everything that they needed. We have everything we need here on earth, and we should be grateful for that. So I'm going to read you a few poems from the beginning of the book. This is the first poem. It's called Hello, Earth. Hello, Earth. It's your children, some of your children, the human ones. We have been studying you, Earth, but we long to learn more. We want to ask you a few questions. We want to tell you our dreams and wishes. Can you hear us, Earth? Floating. Earth, we have seen pictures of you floating in space, circling the sun with your brothers and sisters. From far away, you look so perfect. But Earth, we are standing right on top of you. How can we be here, climbing trees, walking paths, staring up at constellations, and also out in deepest space? Does that mean that each of us is floating among the stars? Also in this book is some back matter that has a lot more about the science behind all of the poems. So if there are children that are interested in pursuing that and finding out more about each aspect of the earth that I talk about, they can do that. And there are also ways that they can help the earth and participate in conservation. So that is my book, Hello, Earth. I hope that in February you find it somewhere and you enjoy reading it. Thank you so much.
That is unbelievable. I feel like I have to sit with that for a little while. And yes, of course, we're all floating among the stars. Yep, I needed that this morning. Thank you. So now that I can get myself put back together a little bit here, I would like to ask all of our panelists a question to begin the second half of the program. And we can all unmute our videos and talk to each other a little bit. So my first question for all of you is that this year has kind of been a lot, but stories can help us get through all kinds of difficult things. And what do you, as writers for children, think that kids need from stories right now?
I think children need, I a reminder that we're all together and we're linked even though we can't see each other, and they need reminders of the world the way it was and then the way it might be in the future. And they need to laugh.
I so agree with that. All of that you just said, Joyce. And I think about the COVID situation, and I don't think that's something that I would respond to directly in any way, although I did sort of accidentally make up a book that could be interpreted as being about a pandemic. But I think, helping kids celebrate their differences, and as Joyce was saying, expand their sense of wonder. And I also think helping them come to know the power of their imaginations.
Sorry. Those were great answers. I think kids need from books the same thing adults need from books, from reading. And for me, I know I get everything I love about reading usually comes down to one of two things. Either it helps me totally escape real life and everything that I'm not excited about real life for the moment, or it helps me fall more in love with the world and the people in it, kind of to echo, what Joyce was saying about falling in love with the earth and feeling it love you back. So I think those are the two things, that we all need from books.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. There are comments and questions flying here, so I'm going to try to find. Let's see, from Lou here. What would you advise unpublished picture book writers to do as far as submitting to agents versus publishers? Do you recommend a percentage for each?
I think that's a different path for every author. I'm not really sure I understand all of the question, but I think agents right now are probably the way to go. But I personally do not have an agent because I found an editor that I trust, and so I work primarily with that editor. But Hello Earth is with a new publisher, so I am trying something a little bit new with that. I don't know, do either of you have anything to say about that?
I agree that the agent these days is the way to go, because many publishers aren't looking at manuscripts unless they're submitted from an agent. So, and I also tell people they should go to agentquery.com if they're looking for an agent, because it's such a great database they have of agents, and you can, part of the trick is to find the agent that might be interested in what you're doing. And this website helps you do that.
I agree with what they said, but I have a slightly different take on it. I think that a good agent is fabulous. And not just a good agent, but a good agent who's a fit for you and your work and the way you like to work. I have been agented and unagented, and I'm unagented right now. And unlike for novels, I will say it is still possible, more possible to get published without an agent in picture books. There are more editors who are willing to read picture books, probably because they're short, than will wade through, all those novels. But I'll also say, if you're willing to do the research and be a beast about submitting your work, both of which I am, houses will say they're closed. Two Lions, which published Clover Kitty, I think their official stance on the record is they don't take unagented submissions. But I did my research, I sent the manuscript, I emailed a particular editor, and she bought the book. So I think it's all about doing the research and presenting yourself professionally. A good agent is awesome and well worth the 15%, in my opinion. But not having an agent doesn't mean you can't publish a lot of books. So.
Thank you. I think this question came in from fellow Minnesota children's writer David La Rochelle for Joyce. Did you get a complete translation of all the poems, and did that make things more difficult to write your own ideas?
That's a very good question, and I did grab this. This was the original Spanish book, and I forgot to mention the wonderful illustrator, Miriam Essien Laura, who did these illustrations, and I actually got an original piece of art from her, that island that you saw. I just ordered that. I couldn't resist, but I got a copy of the book. They didn't send me a translation because basically they didn't like those poems. They didn't feel like they were worthy of the illustrations. And it's funny because my daughter-in-law is from Spain, and she was visiting, and she picked up this book and she read the poems, and she said, "Oh, these are stupid poems. You can write much better ones." Which I wouldn't go that far. I think that, you know, she was being a little biased there, but I think those poems, the original Spanish ones, were written by an adult poet who did not understand how to address children. And so they weren't connected in any way. They were random, they were flippant, and so they didn't really help me at all. I just tried to start with the illustrations. So
That
I
was
probably said a little bit too much about that. What's that, Laura?
I just said, imagine if you had read them and loved them. And
I
then
know.
like, oh no, the publisher didn't like these and I love them. What do I do? You know, so.
And I have to say that I was a little horrified about writing new poems to a book that had already been published. And if I had been the author and someone had wanted to publish a book of mine in Germany with new poems, I would have been horrified. So I did make sure that was not the case, that the author and the illustrator were contacted, and this was all cleared by them, because I was worried about how they would feel.
Thanks. No, that's super, I think that's probably super useful. I was very curious about that too. So thanks, David, for asking that question. What else? We've got from Anne. What suggestions do you have for a poet who would like to write a picture book poetry collection? And are there topics that might work best for a nonfiction collection?
Laura, you want to start with that?
I love poetry picture books. They're my favorite thing. And I think, I'm not sure if you're suggesting or asking something not out there yet, but either way, the answer is yes. Because poetry is a hard sell, either finding a topic that hasn't been covered, you know, extensively at least, or a form that is accessible to kids but hasn't really been explored, is kind of the way to go, because I've heard so many times, and it breaks my heart every time, no, we don't need a poetry collection about, you know, whatever, Antarctica, because there's already one. Unlike other topics, it's like if there's one poetry picture book published on a topic, even not by that publisher, they often are of the mindset that one is enough, it's been done. So I would say it's crucial to look for a topic that hasn't been done yet. So if you're in the sciences, maybe away from the soft sciences and into the hard sciences more, that hasn't been done a whole lot in poetry, and things like that. Or a really fresh hook, because it's hard to sell a more traditional kind of poetry collection as a picture book, I think.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Read a lot and find a topic that speaks to you that's just a little bit different, or a different take on it, I guess.
I agree.
And one of our fellow attendees, who is a children's librarian, and I posted this also, but says definitely that meeting of science and poetry is perhaps the sweet spot, and I think that's great fun. Another question about story process. At what point do you give up on a story that just isn't working? I think this was maybe mentioned by Laura when she was trying to find a way to write about piles of puppies being terrifying. And so how do you know when to drop it and when to move on?
Well, I think taking a break from something that's not working is really important. And I've, a lot of my books, in fact, the Mouse House book that I mentioned, I was working on it. It was supposed to come out this past May. And I was coming right down to the deadline, and I was working on final art, but I just felt like it wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I called my editor and I said, I want to switch it and do this other book. And I sort of knew a little bit by then how I wanted to approach the swing book. So I very quickly did the swing book. But all of my books I put down for a long time. Little I, which I mentioned, I approached again and again and again over a period of 15 years before I could figure out how to make that work. So I don't know that I ever just give up on anything. I think there are all these pieces out there that I'm hoping one day might work.
I agree with Michael. It's critical for me to put something down and work on something else if it's not working. And then I will come back to it again. And if it's still not working, I just put it away again. And so I have manuscripts, many manuscripts that I have put down and still haven't worked. So I don't know if they'll ever come to life. But space, you have to change from being the writer of a piece. I think you have to get the distance enough so that you're the reader of the piece and you're coming to it with a reader's needs and a reader's search for clarity. And if you can finally do that, that gives you a better idea of what's going to work.
Thank you. We've got one more from our dear friend David. All of you have new books coming out or just coming out, or new books just out or coming out, excuse me. During this pandemic, how are you finding ways to share and promote your books? Other than being here.
In here.
That's about it for me.
Yeah, I'm trying to be more active on social media, which is just really hard for me for some reason. But I'm thankful that we have Zoom and I can see Joyce and Laura right in front of me as if we're together.
As an introvert, I mean, I do in-person things. Like I go to annual conferences like NCTE and ALA sometimes, and I am missing that chance to connect with educators and librarians who might be the one who really likes my book and then goes and helps, spread it. So that part is different to me, those kinds of in-person things, but I don't do that many in-person things usually. But what I've struggled with is that with social media, which I'm trying to be more consistent about also and struggle with, is that sometimes it feels odd to be, sharing about your books when there's so much going on and so many hard things going on. But I also remind myself that all the hard things or hard times I went through as a kid, books are what got me through. So I try to remember how important books are for kids, to make me feel a little less weird about sharing online. And so I'm, trying to just kind of do the same online stuff that I always do, and to be quicker to respond when people ask for, a free Q&A video for their trivia question thing where they're spreading the word about children's books. And, usually it's like, oh, I just don't have the time, but I'm trying to make more time for those virtual requests. And then, of course, we're always so grateful when there's an actual organized event like this that we can be part of, with any library system that's reaching readers and serving readers. So this is the best kind of thing.
I agree. I think many of us authors are introverts, and we're not at home in front of the camera, as you could probably tell by the beginning of my presentation. But it's the only way we have right now, and especially staying in touch with each other. But it's not natural for us. And but on the other hand, books are all we have. And I've heard so many people saying, I've started reading so much more because I'm home all the time. And I love having that time to read. And I think that's true for children too. They've been reading much more too. So we just have to keep that in mind and keep doing the work and trying to get our books out there.
Sorry, Joyce, I laughed when you started because I thought you said, looks are all we have. And I was like, oh no. So I was inappropriately, as you said, books are all we have. I'm like, books are. Books
Hey,
are.
those kitty ears were pretty cool, Laura. You got it.
Yes, good. I wish I had kitty ears right now. And in that sense of good fun, I would like to sort of close out the program with a question about what's causing you to play right now, and what are you doing for fun? I mean, yes, we're all reading, and I've since I was a kid, that's been my safe spot. So I absolutely appreciate all of you out there who are writing books and talking about your books and making me excited about the next thing that's going to help me get through stuff. And not just me, it is not about me. But yeah, anyway, what's fun right now?
I don't know about Michael and Joyce, but I know I'm busier than ever. There's not extra time, so it's been kind of a struggle. But I love trying new things. So over the past 2 or 3 months, much to the dismay of my family, I've been learning to play the kalimba and sing along. And we also just got, yesterday, we went out for our maiden voyage on an inflatable kayak. With a amused audience at Lake Como. But yeah, so getting outside as much as possible and trying something new that's totally unrelated to, kind of my work stuff, even though I love to escape into writing and reading, it is fun to do different things that are just something new.
I've been spending a lot of time outside and taking walks, and I spent a lot of time on the St. Croix River, and I'm just terrified of what's going to happen when the winter comes, because I think I imagine we're still going to be pretty buttoned down, and I just don't know if I wanted to go through a Minnesota winter without when the outdoors is a little more hostile than it is right now. So, but also reading, watching movies, and you know, my favorite thing to do is to write books.
I find that I'm out more too, like Michael is, and I live in a small neighborhood, and it has a number of early elementary aged kids and toddlers and babies, and I just love that as a neighborhood we've come together and we see each other more, and you know, we stay 6 feet away, but I will walk by a house and a little boy will burst out of the front door and come running down saying, "Mrs. Sidman, I got a new bike today." And he's showing me the bike and he's telling me all about it, or they find a caterpillar, or, I mean, I love that. I love having these neighbors now whose kids I know by name, and it's like we check in with each other every day because we're always at home, and biking is the only thing they can do, really. I mean, they set up Olympics in their yards and do that too, but just connecting with that kind of energy and hope for the future and vitality. I love that. And I think actually the pandemic has been a way that we have grown closer like that. So.
I definitely know my neighborhood better than I did before this. My neighbor kids and my neighbors who got a new dog and all of this stuff that's sort of kept us together, and I have appreciated that. And I know I said that was going to be one of the last ones, but I don't want to ignore Julie, who is super curious about your writing habits, and if you write daily, and do you give yourself assignments? Are you a teacher, Julie?
I wish I had a routine, and I don't. And I just sort of, I spend a lot of time working on my books, but it's a very unorganized process, and there's not a sort of special time I put aside for one thing or another. So it's just very chaotic.
Well, I work in the morning doing the creative work. I get up, I eat breakfast, I climb up to my office with my coffee, and that's the time when I find my mind is sharpest, and that's when I try to do the most difficult part, which is the drawing ideas and creativity out of thin air and trying to distill it into something. But I also work on other kinds of work-related stuff in the afternoon. Do I give myself assignments? That's an interesting question, and it's probably a really good idea. I'm not sure that I do that, but I kind of like the idea of that, and maybe I'll think about that. It would be a way of breaking out of the usual method that I use. So thank you for that, Julie.
I totally give myself assignments. Joyce, I'm sure you're not surprised about that.
Laura is very disciplined. I know that about her.
It's kind of weird that I write poetry a lot because I am like a list, flowchart, goal setting kind of person. But I've got my monthly status sheet that has all my possible projects on it and which ones I'm trying to work on that month. And, you know, in bold print is my goal for that month. And each week I make my little list for that week. But it's also very fluid because things change all the time. And in fact, last week I started an almost full-time copy editing job that will only last a month or two. You know, it's just a freelance thing. But suddenly that plus promotional stuff and business stuff for my 2 books that came out this year, I have had hardly any writing time, and I'm going to be a basket case by the end of October because I'm just not getting to the writing that I love. When things are calm and it's just kind of normal, then like Joyce, I do my creative writing pretty much first thing in the morning and try to ignore all the things that I feel like I should be doing. Because I will do those concrete, easy things to check off the list as a way to procrastinate on the harder but more satisfying creative work I need to do. But if I write, even when things are normal, if I write 2 good hours on creative projects, that's probably out of about a 7 to 8 hour workday. That's doing really well. Like that's a good day if I can get 2 hours in. So, but yay on the assignments all the time. I don't beat myself up though if I don't meet my deadline because something else came up. So I'm not hard on myself about it, but I know life is short, time is precious, and I am always trying to keep in mind, what is it that I really want to accomplish? What matters to me most? And if I don't give myself those assignments, somehow those are the very things that end up falling through the cracks and I don't get to them. And then I feel sad. So assignments help avoid that for me.
You know, I just want to say I've just given myself actually, I think the first assignment I've ever actually given myself while I'm up in Michigan for a few weeks. I've thought I'm working on this new book and I thought, okay, do 2 spreads every day and just started working on the first draft. And so far I did that 1 day. So I'm not beating myself up, but hopefully I'll pick it up again.
That's an even better place to end. We're all chuckling over over the. I'm not an organized human being, so I am completely the one who comes at her creative work in the most haphazard, ridiculous way ever. So I'm with you, Michael. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you authors for your stories and your wisdom about process and your wisdom about writing for children and and cat ears and all of the delightful things this morning. Thank you audience for your attention and your questions. And I will be sending out that brief survey, so please do take a moment to fill that out when you get it. And our grant funders appreciate it as much as we do. Again, please visit your local booksellers for purchasing books by our featured authors, but also Next Chapter. And thank you again to the East Regional Library System for their partnership on this event. And a final, very heartfelt thank you to Michael, Laura, and Joyce for their time and their lovely stories. We will have more Moving Words events through November 17th, so please follow us at www.thefriends.org. And next up is an event in partnership with the Crookston Public Library on Thursday, October 1st, and that'll be at 1 p.m., so sort of a lunchtime thing. You can tune in over lunch for some mostly nonfiction writers in that case. So I hope we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.